Hello, everybody. It is 7:30. I don't know. Jason, you want to start, or do we want to give people a couple more minutes to see if
I'll
we get
give
more?
another minute or two, maybe.
Okay. That works. Do you want to say start at 7:35?
Sure.
Okay.
Or we could wait. I don't know. They don't have to wait that long.
Okay.
just, I just thought I'd give them an extra minute or two.
All right.
Whatever. Do you have, Jackie, do you have it ready to go, the um, PowerPoint?
I do.
Great.
Thank you, Jackie, for doing this again tonight.
No problem.
Jesse, are you going to call this to order formally at some point?
Yep. Thank you for the reminder. I was thinking of it too. All right. What do you think, Jason? All right.
Sure, let's go.
All right. I will call to order the October 28th Bylaw Committee meeting and also public forum.
So the intention of this forum is to provide a brief background and explanation for the what we're colloquially referring to as the snow shovel bylaw, which we are hoping to get passed, or we are introducing for consideration of town meeting, I should say, this upcoming town meeting on in November. So clear, safe walkways. This is an explanation of why we're doing this. These photos are from, where did you take these, Jesse? I know these are yours.
I think they were January of this past year.
Mm-hmm. And they're just showing some of the places downtown where there's, considerable, there can often be a considerable amount of snow, particularly in highly trafficked areas where, and near places like CVS where, some people who may have trouble walking may be going to get, may need to get there for various reasons. So if you switch to the next one, Jackie, please. So in 2022, town meeting member Mary Parr made a motion by citizen petition to create a new bylaw, which would require downtown business owners to clear their sidewalks of snow and ice after a winter storm. The bylaw committee chair at the time, Jeff Struble, volunteered on the floor of town meeting that the bylaw committee would investigate this request. And subsequently, we did invest for several years. We looked at how many other towns in the area handle snow removal. We looked at towns that are our size, smaller, larger, and everything in between, and chose to craft our own bylaw to present to town meeting for its consideration based on what we saw on most of those other bylaws, with some consideration for how Reading operates. Prior to bringing the suggested bylaw to change to town meeting, the bylaw committee is presenting this proposed bylaw for public comment and feedback in this section here. Reading has a lovely walkable downtown area enjoyed by both residents and visitors. Many people use our sidewalks, including those who are handicapped or have mobility issues. The goal of this proposed bylaw is to reduce the likelihood of pedestrian slips and falls during the winter months, and for those with mobility challenges to feel that they can equally access downtown during the winter months. The purpose is to make sure the sidewalks are cleared after a storm and that they continue to be cleared during freeze and thaw periods throughout the winter. Is this still me? This is still me, right, Josie?
That's still you.
Okay, I'm trying to remember how this went. Precedent. Do other towns do this? Yes. Massachusetts general laws allows towns to create local ordinances regarding snow and ice removal. Many other towns, such as Wilmington, North Reading, Beverly, and Wakefield, have bylaws that govern the removal of snow in their business areas. In fact, some, such as, if I remember correctly, Medford, have much stricter than you would expect bylaws in this kind of thing, but we went with a very minimal one, I would say more or less. Or at least
Arlington
we wanted to
also.
start with that one. Huh?
Arlington was another one that had stricter.
Stricter? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next slide. So just to make another brief comment, based on public comments we've received, we haven't updated this presentation, but just to briefly cover some stuff that came up in previous ones, we have since then made some adjustments as we were discussing today at the pre-town meeting. Jesse's okay if I talk about this?
I'm not quite sure what you were going to say. So
About the police and the liability question?
Yeah, I'll handle that.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So basically, we have made some changes to the bylaw in kind of collaboration, working with other departments. I'll kind of explain it more at the end. It's something that we'll probably be amending on the floor of town meeting. We don't have the exact language yet because we have not sat down and crafted it with Ivrea. So that's my, hey, you're going to get this at the end of what I talk about. So basically what this bylaw would do would it basically say that the owner or manager of any property, not the owner or manager of any business, would be in charge of making sure that the sidewalk is cleared. And part of the reason for all of this is we have a great sidewalk plow system. Sidewalk plow comes through, but the sidewalk plow cannot get all the way to bare pavement. It's just, that is not within its capabilities. So even if the sidewalk plow has come through, you know, I have lived on the sidewalk, 2 different sidewalk plow routes in Reading. So I know like you just kind of have that little bit still left on the sidewalks. And this is just to make sure that everything gets cleared because as we know, we get a lot of freeze and thaw, especially sometimes, like I know the pictures I took were from this past January, which we all may or may not remember was a time where we had like some melt and then we had a big freeze. And I think we had some precipitation in there and it just made it treacherous to get anywhere. We'd obviously been working on this bylaw for several years. And then I kind of found myself in a situation where I was very cognizant of how hard it can be to navigate in downtown and get to businesses when, you're kind of feel like you're ice skating. I had some major surgery. For those who have had kids, I had a C-section and I was convinced I was just going to fall and like it would not end well, but like I had to go to CVS and get stuff. And so there were definitely times where I was like, this is why we need to make sure that things are safe and clear and that people can get where they need to be. Just because, it melts, it refreezes. And so the part of the purpose of this is that it's not just clearing when it first snows. It means that once, we get through that freeze and thaw cycle, like people kind of still have to be making sure that, there's not a thin film of ice or like we didn't get freezing rain and now all the sidewalks are, this sheet of really thin ice where, somebody could slip and fall. I know I can't really speak to this. And unfortunately, Louise, who had a family emergency and isn't able to be here tonight. This is something that we are going to address more comprehensively with Louise and or Ivrea at town meeting. But it is our understanding that, because one of the things we did look into is this bylaw going to create greater liability for either the property owner or the business owner or whoever it may be, or the town for that matter. And town council has told us that no, it does not greater kind of apportion liability on any of these. Because again, we wanted to make sure we kind of weren't doing something that was like, maybe making it easier for the town, but then people could sue the property owner easier. Like I said, Ivrea and actually Louise can give a much more comprehensive explanation of the Massachusetts Tort Claim Act. I am not familiar with it, so I'm not going to try to explain it. So basically what this bylaw says is that the the removal of the snow and ice has to be done in a manner that clears a full paved path or a minimum of 42 inches wide, whichever is less. We picked the number based on the kind of average width of wheelchairs and or walkers, and that we give ways that this can be removed. We've met with DPW kind of when we were working on this and talked about like how are we going to make sure that this is done in a way so as you'll see in the future, everything that gets put down will have to come from a list that's provided by DPW. And we also came up with a time frame of 4 hours between sunrise and sunset after the whatever frozen precipitation has come on each sidewalk. There's obviously some wiggle room there. If we get 2 feet of snow, nobody expects these sidewalks to be cleared in like 4 hours. It's kind of a discretionary thing. It's the idea that, once downtown is cleared and open for business, it's the expectation that this is kind of coming in a timely manner, that the sidewalks will also be cleared. Jackie, if you could give me the next slide, please. So this is the map of the downtown smart growth business district. The green with the little dots. We picked this because it was, kind of the citizen petition by Mary Parr. We needed to put some sort of limitations on where was this going to be. And when we, way back when, started the whole process, in our conversations with various town employees, this kind of became the obvious answer that we were going within the business district. Also, just given that, the point of this was to really make it so that people could access downtown. Next slide, please. So, this kind of just spells out some things, including that handicap ramps that are located within, the sidewalk of a public way should be cleared to the full extent of the width and length of the slope. We just want to make sure that everything is getting cleared. And we also, DPW will give a list of agents that they approve to make the sidewalks not slippery. We've also been in conversations with DPW, which actually came out of our first one of these forums. And they have agreed that they will put barrels of the salt melt sand concoction that they have, that I know they put by the schools. They're going to put some of these barrels around downtown as well, so that it makes it hopefully even easier, so that there is something like right there. So that's a kind of a helpful thing to have. Next slide, please. So, this kind of gives the somewhat boring legal things, just explaining what gives the authority for this. We also talked about what would constitute like an individual offense, and so we kind of went with what was the already being done in other towns, which is just basically that every day it's a separate thing. So it's like, if sidewalks don't get cleared for 5 days, say, and DPW notices and is writing tickets, a property owner can be fined each of those 5 days. So it would the fines would accrue over time, and that the bylaw should take effect on November 1st, 2026. Next slide, please, Jackie. And so this is kind of our little table that goes along with this. This is what we're going to be amending. The enforcing person will be the Director of Public Works or their designee. I have had several meetings now with Chief Clark and Chris Cook and Matt and Jane, and we've all kind of tried to figure out the best way to handle this. RPD kind of expressed some concerns that this was going to possibly burden their ability to respond in emergencies, and that is absolutely something we do not want. That takes precedent, and so we kind of all talked about it. This is kind of some towns do it through DPW, some do it through a building inspector. We don't have a building inspector right now permanently. So this could end up being something that gets shared a little. So we're going to make it so there's a little bit of flexibility, but it would not fall to RPD. So we would not be burdening them.
We do have a building inspector, by the way.
We've hired somebody?
Yep.
Oh, awesome. Well, there we go. We've hired somebody since we all had these conversations then. So now we have a building inspector, so they may end up sharing some of this. But it'll just kind of, we're working with Ivrea to make sure that we have language that will give some flexibility so that if this gets passed, as it kind of gets tested out and goes into practice, the town has the ability to kind of flex a little bit what works and what is most practical and practicable without having to come back and say we need to change the bylaw. So next slide, please. So this is just basically all of the very legally complicated things in plain English, which is that if it snows or there's other precipitation, property owners in the downtown smart growth overlay district must clear their sidewalks within 4 hours between sunrise and sunset. We do not expect anybody to be out there in the middle of the night. And then that they have to keep them clear of snow and ice, and that it must be wide enough to allow wheelchairs to safely use the sidewalks. That everybody kind of envisions this as being something that is used via see-click fix, take picture, it'll alert DPW to inspect and determine if a property owner should be fined. And that if this is passed, it would take effect November 1st, 2026. So that way there's plenty of notice and, we could get everything ready to get this up and running. Next slide, please. That's it. Are there any questions from anybody? And I will say, we love questions. We love feedback. This is the third one of these forums we have done now, and we've definitely, been able to take suggestions. We talk about it as a committee. Obviously, I think it was Crystal who brought up the idea of the barrels, if DPW could do that. And that was something that we were able to work out. So, we certainly are open to feedback and suggestions, and all right. Karen Rose Gillis, I see you have your hand up first.
Hi, thanks for doing all this. I'm on the select board, but I'm calling as a resident, so just let it put it out there. When you showed the map, I live on Linden Street, Upper Linden Street, and I was a little confused on the map because I just want to say I'm super excited about this because I walk my dogs downtown and it is a nightmare. Others will disagree with me, but I think the map got me confused because I'm not sure if Upper Linden, where I live, is included in that map or not. So I don't know if and then I'm also concerned about Lowell Street. So I can't quite tell.
So I believe that the upper portion, so I'm looking at Linden, and it looks like it cuts off before Woburn.
Oh, so it's not even up here. Okay.
No.
Okay.
We've had people make suggestions of other areas to do this, and we kind of intentionally kept our scope very narrow, just because, otherwise, we're a committee of 5 volunteers, and it's, it would have been kind of an impossible task to start redrawing boundaries of kind of what made sense or what didn't. So that's kind of how we went with something that already has a defined
okay.
order.
But that makes sense. So yeah. I guess, has it ever been considered to be town-wide so that everybody was required to do it?
Yes, that came up. We, again, kind of figured, and obviously town meeting will do what town meeting wishes to do. There obviously oftentimes, amendments on the floor. And we very intentionally tried to keep this to kind of what was the charge we were given. And we felt that we had some very good, thoughtful conversations about kind of our role in creating policy in the town. And we felt that we really should stick closest to what was brought to us to look into. So, and that was like, we're starting small. If people want to make it town-wide, people want to make it town-wide. So,
okay. Okay, and does this also include town hall in front of town hall?
That's a good question. I'm like trying to look at the map. I actually don't think it does.
Okay.
Yeah,
because-
Matt always knows. Yeah, Matt knows the smart district better than we do
I know.
when he's here. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know the boundaries of the smart district off the top
I
of my
don't
head
think it
very
does.
well.
I think it
Okay.
stops at Woburn. So I think like I'm actually nobody can see me because I'm like, behind Zoom. But I'm looking at the little purple area right above the smart growth district where there's that like which I think is like the town green and then town hall right up there next to it.
Right.
So,
Okay.
I would hope that town hall would follow the lead of also making sure that they're following it. But that's a good question for
I'll
Matt
talk,
and
I'll
Jane.
talk, yeah, I'll talk to Jane. All right, that's all I had because it doesn't look
Okay.
like I'm involved. So
Yeah.
all my questions don't apply, but thank you
Got
very
it.
much for your efforts.
Carlo, you have your hand up.
Thanks. Could you go to the slide which the some of our neighboring towns already have this, please?
There we go.
Yeah, okay. So our nearest abutter, well, we have several abutters.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to be worried about Beverly because Beverly's downtown is huge.
Right.
Wakefield, North Reading doesn't have a downtown, so I have a question on that one. And Wilmington doesn't either. So let's start with Wakefield. So with Wakefield, is it just downtown?
That is a good question. Let me look it up really fast because we've looked at this so many times that I can't remember if it's just downtown. Let's see. Sorry, I think I have notes on this somewhere, and it's probably just easiest for me to Google it rather than try and find my notes on where all these things are. I know, so I can say for certain that I know it's commercial properties in Wakefield.
It says commercial and multifamily
Right.
real property.
Yeah, that's multifamily homes.
Throughout the town.
Yes.
All right. And Wilmington and North Reading don't have a downtown, so what do? Same thing?
I believe so. Wilmington has a really great brochure. Hold on their website. Wilmington, I believe, is also so Wilmington does not have a downtown, but they do the sandal the same way as Wakefield. It's commercial property. They say the owner or occupant of a place of business. It has to keep the adjoining premise. And I think that's the same in North Reading too. So it's not like a downtown business district like we do.
Okay.
They're still saying basically if you are operating a business, you need to keep your
All right. That makes sense. And you probably can determine where I'm going with this.
Mhm.
So I live in downtown as well. I live on Main Street. So a little bit different than Karen, but so, before Dunkin' Donuts closed, I made sure my corner was, maybe not 42 inches, but 2 shovel scoops with to my neighboring property. And he didn't do the same. So I worried about my property. I shoveled out the hydrant when it was in front of my building. Now it's on the corner of Village Carpet. I still shovel that hydrant. It's been there a couple of years. I live here. Wakefield, what Village Carpet doesn't. And if it's a bad storm, they're not coming to shovel. So I take care of the hydrant and I enjoy doing that. But and I love the intent of this, but and I obviously encourage you guys to have all your ducks in a row for town meeting because obviously these questions are going to be asked about these if you have the slide about the other towns. But so if I was in favor of this bylaw, I would say the same thing as the other towns. All of South Main Street, people are walking to McDonald's, they're walking to Bagel World. They're, we're supposed to be walkable Reading, we're supposed to be green, we're supposed to be all this stuff. Yet I'm a little disappointed that you only went by the instructional motion when it's so much more than that. I know who the violators are in downtown, and I'm not going to single them out or never will, but I get very annoyed at some businesses and business owners or property owners, whatever you want to call it. And if we're going to do this, I would vote no either way, just so you know. But if we're going to do this, we got to do it to everybody. That's the way I feel. So South Main Street, and obviously North Main Street, all you have is Dandelions and they're closed. Home Goods, who's walking on Home Goods, I don't know. But so that was that on this slide. And then, yeah, so my question, like you said, we went with the limitations to make an easy defined area, right? Smart growth district has been delineated for a long time. So this starts next year. So I was happy to see that it's not starting this winter. Gives us time. $100, that's debatable. I'm not opposed to it if this passes. But I really think this needs more time, because the last thing I want to do is have this debated on the town meeting floor. You guys are the bylaw committee, you're a respected body, and to spend a whole night on this, because that's what it will be, is my guess. I don't know for sure, but Jesse, you're on town meeting. You know how it goes, and Karen Rose Gillis is new to this, so she'll learn. But when something like this comes up that came from instructional motion, then went to bylaw, and you had your meetings, your public meetings, but most of the town meeting is not going to know about this till they see it in the warrant. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think this was tried before and it failed. Am I right or wrong
No.
on that?
No, it hasn't gone forward. It was on the warrant. Well, Fidel was still town manager, and he asked us at the time to pull it off because that was at a time it was going to go to the first town meeting where they thought MBTA was going to happen. And so he asked us to remove it because they were just felt that the warrant was just getting overburdened. So we were asked to pull back on it.
Okay. Obviously, I don't know the will of town meeting. I can't predict it. Obviously, town meeting has done some things that don't make sense and a lot of things that do make sense. This one, there's mass general law, but if we're gonna do it, I hope town meeting would support making it fair. We're supposed to be about equity and this and that. So just to single out the downtown, I'm gonna call them business owners, because that's who's gonna be doing it. Unless we don't have any large buildings. Oh, you got the one across from me, the Rise building. They probably have a management company. You have other buildings that have management companies, Ace Flats and this and that. But all the small businesses, the pizza shop, Sims Jewelers, Chocolate Truffle, Whiteland Books, they're doing the shoveling, right? So
They might be doing it, but they should. This is saying they shouldn't be doing that.
Right, but in practicality, right? Who's going to do it? Right? You're going to wait for someone and jeopardize.
Well, we're not going to punish those businesses if they
No.
don't. It doesn't change anything as to what's already happening now. It's actually putting a slight more onus, I would say, on the business owners. I actually looked into CVS. I was curious, and my mother's a title researcher. It turns out that CVS building property has been owned by a company in North Carolina since the 1950s, and that's who I'm thinking is doing this. I'm not thinking CVS is doing this. I'm not thinking Whiteland Books is doing this.
Again, I don't know. But I'm like I said, for the small, like when I used to have pizza shops, I had many retail front-facing businesses, and I wasn't the landlord, so I shoveled because I'm there to get the store open, and I'm not going to wait for the landlord to come when I'm about to open and have people risk injury. So that's a side note, right? But in practicality, most of the small business owners, because they want to have their customers come in and be safe, are going to do it. There might be agreements with the bigger buildings that, yes, when a storm comes, you're going to see someone in a vest with snowblower, shovel, ice, and they're going to do that. I see that in many communities where it's hired people or the management company doing it. For us, South Main Street keeps on getting developed. So we're going to have more people walking in town. And, I walked.
So are you arguing that we should be holding the small business owners accountable for doing it? I'm not clear where you're going with this, Carla.
No, I'm going with it. If this should have been proposed to save us a lot of trouble, to have it be just like the other cities and towns.
Yeah.
All commercial businesses.
Yeah,
Okay.
I hear what you're saying, Carlo. And I don't disagree with you. I think, we had a lot of conversations on kind of, like, what do we do with this? Do we try to come in and say like townwide, everybody shovel? And we were like, well, that's going to get a lot of pushback. And so then we decided like, okay, we're going to just stick with what were we asked to do, which was downtown. I think certainly if town meeting, somebody wants to come in with a friendly amendment and say all commercial properties, okay, if that's what town meeting wants, like all for it. If there's somebody wants to come in and say, let's do this town-wide, and town meeting says, great, we approve this, like that's fine by us. We just kept it kind of to what we were asked to look at rather than kind of what we maybe would have chosen to do if like it was craft this from kind of out of nothing, if that makes sense. Like if we were asked to kind of define the terms. And which is hard because, we're, like I said, we're a committee of 5. We've looked at a lot of different things and we kind of were looking at like, with something like this, it's like, well, what do we think is the best way to start? And sometimes the best way to start something is to kind of start small and test it out and say like, you know, does this actually work? And like, what kinks do we need to work out before we, if we get this going and everybody says, hey, this is great, downtown's so much more accessible, like we want to expand it town-wide, then at least we've kind of started building that infrastructure of like, how is this working, if that makes sense. So we just kind of decided we were going to stick with what we were asked to do rather than kind of making it into something. We went with what we were asked to do rather than like going with like the sky's the limit, make it big kind of a thing.
Particularly because I think we strongly felt that even as bylaw, we wanted to stick more to what we were kind of asked to do, I think, because, this question of presenting it or not. But Carlo, I actually had another question because you said you'd vote for against it either way. So, this came to us because, Mary Parr specifically was concerned, I think specifically about residents with wheelchairs and whatnot falling over at CVS or maybe like that if they didn't clean, because that's a particularly dangerous spot. And I'm curious what you think should or shouldn't be done. Are you saying if you're going to vote against it either way, you're just thinking that the status quo is acceptable and then there isn't a solution here?
I think I have been self-employed my whole life, right, since college, since 1989. And I've owned many retail storefronts. I currently don't, but I've owned many. One in this town, one in Medford, or several in Medford, Linfield, Winchester, and so on, in Boston as well. So I've always done the right thing, but that's me, right? Because I care about my customers, I care about my employees. So it's more about fairness, because if we're going to impose this and it passes, it's not fair. And that's what we talk about these days on what's fair and what's equitable. So from
you said you would vote against it either if we you already said you would vote either way, even if we expanded it. Why is that?
Because it's up to, you're going to say property owner, but I'm going to call it the business, because that's the one who's turning the key and opening the door and welcoming their customers and employees. It's up to the business, however we want to phrase it. Ultimately, it's up to the business on what they do for their property, whether they own it or not. So I get the intent of this. I would love for all of us to be good neighbors and do it. Trust me, I walk in downtown and I shake my head in disgust, and I make mental notes on who to patronize and who not to patronize. So maybe that's something that's, paying it forward.
I don't think there's a lot of options for going to somewhere to get your drugs, your prescription drugs.
I don't know. I don't know if CVS, how much of a violator they are, whether you go to the back entrance or the front.
I'm just saying, some people may not have options,
No.
I think we have to have some kind of system for encouraging / maybe slightly.
Right. But unfortunately, most people shovel their doorway, and that's unfortunate, right? CVS in particular has another 20 feet, right? If you're coming from the south, before you hit that door. When you're coming from the north, they only have a couple feet before you hit that door because there's another building there. So that CVS storefront you have 20 feet, and then you hit the door. So most times, unfortunately, I agree with you, they shovel the door, the path to go in. So you're not bringing the sand and the slush or as much in the store. So I just, I want downtown to be safe, and I want the rest of town to be safe. You know, every time we have a storm, we have people constantly complaining about the schools, right? The kids walking to school. How do we make that safer so they're not walking in the street? So it's like, for me, it's all or nothing. I'm just one vote. For me, this bylaw should be the whole town, residents included. Let's be fair, because I walk all over town. I still walk in the winter, and I have to walk in the street. And if it's right after a
But you would
storm-
still vote against it if we made it the whole town.
Yes, I
Okay,
disagree.
that's clear. I want to be clear on that.
Yeah. It's just doing right, doing what's right as a human being, right? And maintaining your property in the summer, spring, winter, and fall. Cutting your grass, shoveling the snow, keeping your property clean, whether it's residential or commercial. And I'll end it there. I appreciate Mary Parr's intent. I really do, because I live it, right? I live in downtown. I walk to Market Basket. I walk to CVS. I walk to my meetings and blah, blah, blah. So the library, I'm sure the library gets done. It's a town-owned building. Town hall, I'm sure gets done. It's a town-owned building. Pleasant Street Center, I'm not worried about those buildings. Schools, a little bit different story, because it's a large area to cover for the kids walking to school. So I took a lot of time. I think you guys have flushed this out. You got the fines down pat. You looked at other communities. I think you've done your due diligence. I just don't agree with it that to enforce it, and I don't know. I don't have the answer. I really don't. I can name off a few businesses right now that really do a horrible job, and especially from the freeze over. Snow is one thing, but when that freezes over, it's like I said, I shake my head and I take my life in my own hands if I don't want to go on the street. So it's very disconcerting. And there's always patches of buildings that someone says, I'm going to stop here. Right. So maybe this will, if it passes, you know, I'm good. Maybe better things will happen. But, and if it's what it takes, that's a good thing. But for me, because I've always done the right thing, you know, that's where I stand. Thanks.
Thanks, Carl. Joy, you've had your hand up.
Hi, thank you. Joy Bolio, Precinct 7, and I own a business downtown. I own a hair salon that's directly across from the train station on the corner of Haven and High. A couple of notes that I have here. The idea of having salt barrels is fantastic. That would be such a big move into helping these small businesses like mine, because in this economy with this type of fine that's laid out, and going to my landlord who lives out of the country and saying, oh, sorry, you got that fine, she's just going to up my rent. So that business, my business, is going to, if I don't do this, which we do, but if I don't do this, then that in theory is going to go to the property owner, but realistically, it's going to come down to me having to pay it. But the salt barrels are a fantastic idea. I do think that this fine is too much. It might not be for like 2 Haven Street, where they're a huge building, but my 40 by 40 building, that would be, if I was on vacation and nobody cleared that snow, that would be almost as much as my rent. So that would be cost prohibitive for me. That would really put a burden on us. So especially if it's every day. So if I was away, who's going to clear my snow? I'm either going to have to pay the fine or I'm going to have to hire somebody. Either way, it's going to cost me money. I'd rather just try to pay the fine when I got back and it would sit there. Last year, Karen Herrick, as you all know, Karen Herrick from the select board comes into the salon. She's a patron. And she came in and she was looking for a parking space right along Haven Street, right outside my building. And she said, what's going on? There's no parking spaces. I said, I know, they put all the snow there. So she called or did whatever for See-Click Fix. I didn't know that that was something that we had access to in Reading, or I would have used it before. The problem that we have in our building is that if you guys all know our space, we have a double wide sidewalk. So, and I also have, my building is 40 by 40. Then there's, I think it's 8 feet, it might be 6 feet of sidewalk that surround it. I have 2 handicap curb cuts, and then it goes back to meet up with the old Rite Aid building. So I clear all of that snow.
Mhm.
But when I get there in the morning, if the DPW has been there, and they work very hard, this is not trying to bash the DPW by any stretch of the imagination. Everybody is trying to do a great job. But the size of the piles of ice that they leave me to try to clear is physically impossible. I can't get the curb cuts wide enough because I would need a jackhammer some mornings when I would go in there. So while it's great that they come by, it's physically impossible to get through it. So I've been out there with boiling water. I've been out there with boiling salt water. I have been out there in the middle of the night trying to shovel it because I know it's going to freeze over. And I'm like, it's 12 o'clock. I'm just going to go down there now.
Mhm.
And I'm downtown trying to clear sidewalks. So for the amount of effort that I know I put in to try to keep it safe, 4 feet is only half of my sidewalk. If I cleared half of my sidewalk, whatever melted would then make it treacherous again. So I have got to clear all of that space. And to do that, and people still go by and they're like, oh, you did a terrible job. I have one of those ice chippers. I'm a hairstylist. I am not like, I don't know how to work a jackhammer. And I'm out there with an ice chipper trying to get it out. And I do it immediately. And I do it right when they come through. And I do it as soon as the sun comes up, as soon as it starts snowing. I've done it before the roads have been clear, and I've walked down from Grand Street to try to clear the sidewalks. And especially the back side of the building, I think that's Green Street. Is that what that is?
I think so.
The DPW doesn't even do that curb cut. It might be, maybe it might be as wide as their little machine. But it could be, I mean, that one winter where we got like 7 feet of snow, it was so much snow, I couldn't get it over the piles. And there's nowhere to put it. And then if I try to put it in the street, then when they take the corner, it blocks my corner again. So I recognize that my location is a complicated case, but I'm also one of the small businesses in town. And I do agree with Carlo in that it is not equitable to ask me and not ask somebody on South Main Street.
Mhm.
I don't think that that's right. People do walk to Capri. They do walk to Burger King. They do walk in that area just as much as they walk out in front of my house, out in front of my salon. And I think that it is going to put a burden with these dollar amounts on anyone who is trying to be that small business. I don't have a giant building. I don't have a company that can come through for me. And frankly, we don't have the budget for that.
Mhm.
So while this is great and we work our butts off to try to keep this clear and we try to do this as best we can, we are often working against the DPW and what they leave us.
I wish we could kind of flip things around and be like, oh, could you have come to our first meeting we had with second, I guess, with where Chris Cook was there, because it was really helpful having hit like some of these discussions in the room, which is how we got to the salt and ice, because Crystal said, like last year we had this freeze and it was impossible to get anything. And that was kind of what helped us get to the like, oh, well, DPW, is buying this in bulk. And so it's way easier for them to like.
I bought it in advance. I had it shipped from one of my companies in November last year so that I could be prepared.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think, so, I know one of the things that we've talked about with DPW is the idea of, when is that they do come through kind of after they get through with the clearing, when there are the big piles on the corners, about like coming through and clearing those. I know where your location is, and so it's kind of like you said, it's a little bit unique, and it's like I kind of feel like this actual specific location needs to be flagged to DPW, just because I certainly hear you that it's like you can clear this, but then they come through and they, you know, messed up more, which I totally get because
Yeah.
we used to be on Middlesex by the library, and my husband would go out and snow blow, and sometimes it felt like they came through with the sidewalk plow and made it less clear than it was when we had done it.
Yeah.
And it was like, and you're just like, oh my gosh, I've done all this work. You know, I think our hope is that this bylaw is a carrot and not a stick. You know, I think nobody wants to be excessively punitive to small businesses. We did a lot of discussion about the fines, and it's hard because, and I certainly hear you that for you that's a huge amount of money, and I
Yeah.
respect that. And it's like, but for somebody like CVS, it's like, you know, we kind of tried to strike a balance of, you know, something that, I mean, and I understand that it's a bigger burden for you.
Yeah.
And can I just, sorry, if you don't mind, just really be clear in our heads too. I think that whenever this kind of thing is discussed, there's this thing that people have in their head, like, oh, someone will hit see, click, fix immediately. Someone will come, check it out, and boom, and then the fine is assessed and we're done. And I can say, for what we've discussed, DPW has a ton of discretion here. If, for example, someone sent a see, click, fix on Thursday night, they probably wouldn't get it because of the weekend and the way it works. They may not have even have a chance to look till Sunday. I think ideally they come before that, but they might not. And I think the other thing that we made clear in our discussions is that we think there should be a lot of discretion here. You know, and if I had to guess, my guess is ultimately this would come down to repeat offenders. I think that if someone did it and then, you know, I wasn't there, get a C-click fix, something's wrong, someone, and then like they come like a day later and it's still bad, then they might contact the business owner and say, hey, someone's did a C-click fix, they'd like you to clean this, can you just make sure you keep this clean? And I would have guessed that that'll probably happen at least once or twice more before it's finally like, hey, we've told you a bunch of times, you're still not doing it, and somebody is very upset about this, you know, and keeps coming to us about this. So, you know, but this is definitely not a situation where we can see like one time something happens, someone gets a secret fix, they come and like, you know, that's not how I would be highly surprised if that's how this worked. And even from our discussion with DPW, they don't want it to work that way. You know, they want to have, it's more like they have something in their pocket that they can use if it gets to the point where they feel like, okay, this is a danger spot and these people are just not doing, they're just ignoring like the danger there. You know what I'm saying?
So yes, I hear you, and that sounds totally reasonable, 100%. And that's great. Where I am stuck on is that this is a bylaw, right? So the nature of it, and correct me if I'm wrong, the nature of it is that it can be enforced to the letter. And so if it doesn't say in there that it's discretionary, and it doesn't say that like you get to, you know, freebies or something like that, like then somebody could hold my feet to the fire for it.
I think
Am I
it does say it's
understanding that? Like,
discretionary.
it does.
Am I wrong?
Can we pull up rather than arguing about it, can we have
remember
the?
Jesse?
No, I would love to be wrong.
I was about to pull it up on my own computer, but Jackie, would you mind bringing up the presentation with the actual language of the bylaw for me, please? And Kevin, I see you have your hand up. I have a feeling you want to respond to some of this, but let me just get through. Okay.
Yeah, the very last sign there. Well, the time limit can be extended at the discretion. And the next one, I think it
Next
might
one.
be the
Can we see the next slide, please? Oh, next.
next.
Yeah.
Nope, not
Nope.
it either.
I think it's gonna be the table.
Yeah.
Or sorry, actually, no, it was the one that we were just on,
It was one we
the
were just on.
previous with the
Yeah, that's
text.
fast.
May be enforced.
Maybe enforced.
The may makes
Yeah.
it discretionary. So basically, okay. So I'm going to just do a little bit of like the breakdown of the actual language here, which just helps, which is, so where we say the regulation adopted pursuant thereto may be enforced, may is giving discretion to DPW, whether or not they want to
Okay.
follow.
Okay.
You know,
And
whether,
Jesse, can I jump in for
Yeah,
1 second?
sure.
Just that I recall us having a conversation as we were crafting this, I think with Ivrea, about whether we should have a warning within the table of fines.
Yeah.
And the feeling was, don't do that, because it gives the town, it gives DPW the ability to handle it as they see fit. Like it doesn't set up like because it's already just because it's already may as opposed to shall or will. You don't have to be explicit about there being warnings, because that's always an option, and it allows for them to really, focus on the repeat offenders, as opposed to the like, this person is always clearing their sidewalk, and this one time with this freak storm that happens literally over February vacation, I came back from February vacation to that driveway of ice, and we spent the next week, because obviously there was no melt in the stores. So like, freak accidents, you talk to them and you're like, this is what happened, is going to be very different from, like, not to, we're all picking on them, the CVS of like, you pretty much always know that that's going to be
Was Medford the one where if you didn't do it, they did it and then charged you?
Yes, that was Medford.
Kind of awesome.
Medford did do that. The DPW would shovel and then charge you, which I don't think our DPW wanted to take that on.
No.
I doubt it. Okay, well, that I definitely hear that, and I think that that does make it more reasonable. Reading this legalese is not my forte. Again, I do hair, but that doesn't change my feeling on it being for all commercial businesses. I think that that is a really, really valid point. And so I won't vote yes on this next week or whenever we're meeting, but I do appreciate that you all as a committee pointed that out to me and showed me that there is that room, and it is written in there with that specific language, because I would not have picked that up myself. So I think that if it's part of I don't know if you pointed that out in your previous meetings and I'm just coming to the table late, but I do fully appreciate that. And also, I don't know what we can do to will we get salt barrels whether or not this bylaw passes?
That
Do we
would
know anything?
be a different discussion with DPW, just because we've been having it as part of this. And I will say this has been a very helpful discussion, because like I said, like we've been living this for a long time now. And so I think sometimes it's like, we make assumptions of what just is, we understand. So this is very helpful, because I've actually made a note to make sure I put something into the presentation to explain this is discretionary. Because yes, a lot of other people are going to have this same concern.
Yep. And that's really my biggest complaint, I think, is that the DPW leaves us a mess to clean up oftentimes. And it will be those offenses for me would be cost prohibitive, but I don't anticipate incurring any of them. And I do think that it would be more equitable to have all commercial businesses. But other than that, I think you guys you answered all my questions. Thank you.
Thanks. Kevin McCarthy has had his hand up for a long time, and I'm sure has things to say on this. So floor is all yours, Kevin.
Thanks. Good evening, guys. How are you? Kevin McCarthy, economic planning and development for the town. A couple of quick things. I've had another handful of conversations with some of the business owners, and I think that there's very little objection in principle to the bylaw. And most of them point out that they shovel themselves. Most of them were also quick to point out. Several of them pointed out to me that it is in fact in the terms of their lease. And for the ones who are in slightly larger buildings where there's a management company, they pay for it by extension. So, but none of them were quibbling over it. The the pushback, and this might have come up before. So pardon me if I'm being repetitious. But their concern, several of their concerns were in fact about the discretion that we just spent several minutes talking about. Because I think they feel that the risk is lopsided. The discretion won't work in their favor, and they may be on the wrong end of it inadvertently. And so it's set up in some sense where they're going, well, hang on, may means they could decide or they might not decide. So so they don't quite know what to do with that. And a couple of them, one in particular on Main Street, is at quite a narrow section. And as they were saying, they're reading in some sense a quite prescriptive piece of it that said, 36 inches, say, for example. And they said, there's really nowhere for me to put the snow except on the street. So if I fail to adequately clear it, and it's on the sidewalk because I can't put it in the street, that's also going to be a no-no. Then I'm in no man's land, and I'm setting myself up for failure at the discretion of the town. And so I think the sort of the specificity around how that would, when the rubber meets the road, they were concerned about that, especially in the context where they feel that they mostly do a good job almost all the time. And so I think that's the general sentiment from a lot of the businesses I spoke with, so that there isn't an objection, but they have this sort of spidey sense that this looks like I'm gonna lose. Heads I win, heads you win, tails I lose. So there's a little concern about that, and they'd like to see, perhaps in the language about May, they say, well, explicitly talking about the number of hours, and explicitly talking about warnings. And I know that's really tricky, but I just wanted to share that that's certainly been on the minds of several of them as they're going, well, it feels like it's 90% of the way there, but those details are giving them some pause. And again, they most of them feel like this will wind up with them being punished for what is the transgressions of a relatively small number of other businesses. So anyway, I leave it at that. They're conflicted. They're also aware that most communities do in Massachusetts do have a snow bylaw ordinance. So again, they're not objecting to it. They just sort of say, well, this feels a bit like we're going to be under the caution. We're not going to be clear about what the expectations are or how much time we have or a couple of those details. So I will leave it at that.
Just to clarify, the timing is spelled out. It's the 4 hours after sunrise or 4 hours after the snow or ice or precipitation ceases between sunrise and sundown. So that part is spelled out in there.
Yeah, I'm just not quite sure that it's dead easy to understand. Yeah, I mean, I think so. So I think we'd have to give maybe spelling it out with examples. A couple of concrete examples might be helpful, because I think 4 hours behind. So let me think about this. Okay, so in the real world, that would mean if there's a snowstorm that starts at 6 p.m. and ends at 3 a.m. Okay, so maybe contextualize it like that. I don't know if we have to, but I think maybe as we're doing as the town is doing info sheets for businesses, we'd have to work through some examples maybe and say, for example, maybe that'd be helpful. I don't know.
And because that's part of why we did it like that is just because obviously, as we all know, with time change coming next weekend, the time of sunrise and sunset varies greatly during the snowfall season. You're going to have, it's going to be very different in, December versus March, or April or May, or we have snow at all kinds of times here, I've learned, not being from here originally. But, I think, like I said, I think Liz said, we did consider the whole idea of warnings. I don't want to make it seem like that wasn't something that we, didn't investigate and didn't want to do. Again, it was just I think the counsel that we got from Ivrea and from all like what we saw elsewhere was just this was kind of what made the most sense and what most others are doing. You know, I think I just practically, and I can definitely understand the concern that the discretion is not going to break in their favor. You know, I think practically then it becomes a whole thing of like, then you, if you're doing warnings, you have to track the warnings. Um, you know, I know
Right.
in our conversations with DPW, you know, they they're recognizing that it's, you know, and they're not necessarily gonna be out there with a ruler going, is this 42 inches cleared? You know, is this, you know, it's, are people making an effort? You know, I mean, that's, um, I would guess potentially going to be more of the litmus test rather than like something very exacting and prescribed. But unfortunately, you kind of can't say like, well, businesses should make a reasonable effort to clear the sidewalks. You know, it just, you have to give like a concrete definition. Otherwise, it's like what one person's idea of reasonably clear versus, you know, another person's. I mean, you know, if you look back at the pictures we showed at the beginning, like, you know, CVS could be like, well, there's a little like cow path through the ice, and so that's kind of clear, you know, whereas most of us would be like, well, I could still slip and fall on that. Like, so, you know, that's kind of why we had to do it as we did. But I certainly understand they're concerned about the discretion.
Yeah.
And I just don't want people to
Look,
think that we didn't consider that.
Yeah, I think I think, you know, they are, as anyone would be, I think I think they're afraid of the unknowns. So this represents a change, it represents an unknown, and it represents, and then there's the, at the end of it, there's the, at the discretion of DPW, and they go, oh, okay, that's a wide open, I really don't know what's going to happen here. So you know, it's scary. So I get, that's really what it boils down to, right?
Yeah. But thank you for talking to the businesses. We certainly appreciate that. And Joy, I saw your comment in the chat. I can definitely do some more work on trying to break down the legalese as both a lawyer and somebody who's spent, you know, quite a bit of time with this at this point.
Yeah.
I know that like it's second nature for me to read, but it's not for everybody. So thank you. I will make sure that, you know, as we continue to make our edits prior to town meeting on our presentation, that we give as much plain language explanation as we can. So just out of curiosity, Joy, I'm going to ask you this question specifically. Would it be more helpful to lead with the plain language at the beginning or kind of wrap it up at the end?
I think it would be helpful to lead with the plain language. I mean, you all as a committee have an understanding of the way that bylaws work. I don't really even understand what they do other than they're sort of the laws that we have to all follow here in town. So I think that by explaining to people exactly what the intention is, where it's going to go, and what it's going to do for us, and then if they've done their research and read their warrant, they will have already have had some sort of understanding about what it's about.
Okay.
So yeah, I think that it would be super helpful, especially like Karen pointed out that, you know, she was thinking it was going to be more of the downtown area, and it's not. It's really a very small area, which I understand is what was brought to you. But yeah, I think the plain language is going to be really helpful.
Okay, thanks. That's very helpful to know.
Thank you.
As we tweak things. Carlo, I see you have your hand up.
Thanks. Real quick, just to piggyback on what Kevin said at the end, and when you mentioned you know, it's going to be dark at 4:30 soon. So if I'm reading this correctly, and I'm talking like a 3-year-old right now, it's 4:30 at night. It started to snow at 3, right? And the restaurants are their busiest on Friday and Saturday night. 4 hours later, there's 3-4 inches of snow while the restaurant's still open. I know DPW is not driving around with a truck to, you know, see who shoveled or not. Hopefully, you know, someone from the staff will make sure the stairs are clean. You know, there's people in heels and you know, elderly people, whatever you want to call it. So from what I read, you know, the sunset, the sundown. Am I wrong interpreting that at 9 o'clock at night they're an automatic violation if someone reports them? No?
No, they're not. So basically part of the reason for like the sun up to sundown is we were considering kind of like normal business hours. You know, I'm going to guess that Joy's not working at, you know, 9 p.m. on a Friday night. And so we figure
Sometimes, I'm sure sometimes she does.
maybe sometimes every now and then. But you know, that most businesses, close around 5, 6. And also just the idea that, we don't, there are, there's some residential properties also within this area, and, want to be mindful of noise overnight and stuff. And so that's why, so if it starts, let's say it starts snowing at 4, sunsets at 4:30, it would be 4 hours after sunrise the next day.
All right, so this is, thank you for that. So this is a good thing to put on some slides, because the more clear we are for town meeting, the more time we're gonna save for questions, right? Because a lot of people are gonna be, well, what is this? Who's gonna enforce it? You're gonna have all that spelled out, but then these little nuances, so the better that you guys are prepared to answer the questions, to not have us there all night. Because, obviously, we don't know how this is going to go without an amendment. And then if it's an amendment, then we vote on the amendment. Then we go back to the main motion. Then someone else makes an amendment. And then we go back to the main motion. And you know how it goes, right? I've been on now for 6 years. And I know this is a bylaw committee article now that, we had to put on the warrant. And I know most instructional motions have good intent. But in this is a different form of that, because it made it to the bylaw committee. But I just hope that you have, I don't know what night you're going to present on, maybe the second night, or maybe the end of the first night, but please have your ducks in a row as best as you can to spell out, give examples like Kevin said, and the what ifs, and just so town meeting, understands this as best they can. And there'll still be questions, obviously, but that's all I'm asking. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and thank you. I mean, we, like I said, we kind of, this is the third time we've done it. We've kind of made some tweaks along the way, and this has been very helpful. I think this is the first night that we've gotten like the most concrete examples of how to make the presentation better. And so we certainly appreciate that, because, I also have to present 2 portions of the charter review. So I'm going to be spending a lot of time standing up in front of town meeting, which is a little bit daunting. So if I can compress my time that I have to stand up there, that would be great. So we will definitely, I will work on
I'll
this.
volunteer to present this for you, Jesse, if you want.
Sure. I'll be like, here you go.
I won't be jaded at all.
But yeah, so we really do appreciate the feedback. Like I said, I mean, this is our 3rd meeting, and each one we've learned things. We've been able to tweak things, we've been able to explain things better. So yeah, everybody get ready for town meeting. It'll be great.
Jesse, I just want to jump in on one thing. I think it was Carlo mentioned something about DPW, driving around looking to see if people are shoveling. That's not the expectation at any time of day. Definitely not at night, but not at day. So, this is something that's going to get reported through SeeClickFix. This is going to be people, residents or visitors. I don't know how many times a visitor to Reading is going to use SeeClickFix unless they're familiar with it from their own town, but residents are going to use it just like, Joy mentioned with Karen doing it because of the parking being blocked, and that's going to be the alert that allows DPW to come when they are able to, which is not going to be during the snowstorm, because we all know how hard they are working through the night, through the next day. We hear the trucks. I hear them, all through the night, dealing with all of the snow, dealing with getting it off of the streets, making sure that people are able to get to work in the morning, get to school in the morning. That is going to be their priority, and there's no expectation here that DPW is going to be driving around, with a clipboard being like, that hair salon on the corner, they're in trouble.
No, would I expect that? I was just,
Yeah, but I think, kind of, I guess I worry about that perception, because I don't want people thinking that this is kind of like a, first of all, I don't want the implication to be that like DPW has the time for it, but also that that's not going to be how it would get monitored, much less enforced. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. And
exactly. Yeah,
Jesse,
no,
maybe that's something that can be emphasized upfront as well when you're doing the plain language part, because I think making sure people know where, you know, the alerts are coming from is important. You know, this is like people who are struggling to get past an area rather than people going around with rulers. As, I mean, I always carry one, but
I heard something earlier, and this one I would fully support, guys. I like the Medford approach. I really do. I'm being 100% honest. We know who the violators are. That you know how much money we would make, and I'm being totally serious. That's how you correct behavior, right? So there's a lot of most people do the right thing, but then you know, aside from something, you know, a fluke or a weird storm, we know who the violators are. So if this was a Medford / bylaw, we're going to do it for you, and here's the bill, by the way. And then we're going to do it for you again, and here's the bill, by the way.
I totally hear you on
Yeah.
that. Like I love the idea. I worry about the extra burden on DPW. So I think that's where the problem is. Jesse, did you have?
Well, I was going to say they also still have a snow removal bylaw, but this is just how they handle
Enforcement.
enforcing, yeah, the enforcement issue of, you know, they will come clear it for you if you don't follow
Well,
their.
let's add that. I would support that. I really would.
You got to get Chris Cook on board with that first,
I'm
because I
sorry.
don't know how much they have to just.
Chris Cook ran for selectman. You mean Chris Cole? You
Chris
mean
Cole, that's what I mean. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would love for you guys to incorporate that. It may be too late, but I think that sends a stronger message. It really does, because, and then we're really getting the bad actors and hold them accountable, because, and, you know, like Joy was saying, you know, the things happen. You take a weekend off to go away, and it's hard. You rely on someone. Okay, I'm going to pay a high school kid to do it, and they don't do it, and then they don't tell you they didn't do it, and then, you know, so yeah, yeah, I'm more of the good neighbor doing the right thing, but I know people don't, because of a manager of a CVS, as an example, or a Dollar Tree, or the chain stores. They're going to shovel the front and back door, and maybe that's it. If they know now, and I don't know what it says in their lease. Kevin brought up a good point. I forgot to mention that. I've signed many leases in my day. That is part of your lease, snow removal. Whoever is responsible, it's in the lease. So a manager is going to go out there, put their jacket on, shovel 2 feet in front of the door, 2 feet in the back door, and call it a day, because they're cold, and that's not in their job description. But if the, you know, CVS corporate or whoever is saying, oh, we just got whacked for $200, I will pay it. Then they get whacked again for $200. Oh, we got to do something about this. But that's just my 2 cents.
All right. Anybody else? I don't see any other hands. No. Thank you everybody for coming. I know we as a committee need to get a motion to adjourn to officially end, since we're actually also meeting. So if anybody on the committee wants to make that motion.
I'll make the motion, but I also just want to thank everyone who joined. It was really great getting your input on all of this. So I really appreciate your time on this. A motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Liz,
Yes.
Jason,
Yes.
Jared,
Yes.
me, yes. Thank you again, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Kevin, for being here for an evening meeting. So I appreciate it.
All right,
Thanks,
have a good
Thank you
night,
very much,
folks.
everybody.
Good night.
See ya.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.